Arigato gozaimasu! Hey, I'm Liam. This is Rob, and welcome to the Hey Guys podcast. After 3 Christmas movies and 1 Lost podcast, we're shifting gears as we look back at one of the most influential movies of the 21st century, but one that outside of genre fans remains relatively unknown. From its huge influence on the Hunger Games to its even bigger impact on the world of video games, Kinji Fukasaku's ultra-violent jet black comedy Battle Royale remains as relevant, impactful, and unique as it did at the turn of the century. There have been many imitators, but none have come close to matching the absurdist, surrealist brilliance of the original. Rob, this was released at the height of Japanese cinema's worldwide popularity at the turn of the century and came at a time when it couldn't have been, couldn't have been more obsessed with Japan. At a time when Japan still felt, like a magical, otherworldly land. There was still that element of I didn't know anyone who'd been there or anything. But need to say, this movie had a massive impact on me. It was a super important movie for me. I think it kind of came out in my formative years when I turned 18. But was it as big for you? Is it one of those movies you grew up with, you've watched a bunch of times, or are you just returning to this for the first time in 20 years or something?
Yeah, so I am returning to it for a while. So this came out whilst I was in college. So it's one of those things where you get those, your college groups differ from the high school groups. You always get those guys who are into more weirder stuff and things like that. Like where you're talking about films,
that's a good point, because this was a weird movie back then.
yeah. So where you're talking about films like Die Hard or things like that, you've got this guy going, "Oh, you need to watch this film from Japan," and it does. So Battle Royale was a film that was talked about. What interested me, what you've just said though, black comedy. Now I never saw it as a comedy until now, until I watched it again. When I first watched it, it just felt like this ultra realism of the violence of what could happen with overcrowding and things like that.
I think the way it was sold as well, because it's a bleak premise, and you got to remember, again, to come back to your point, back in 2000, early 2000s, there was anime and there were video games and stuff like that, but Japanese culture was still relatively niche back then. It wasn't the same as it is now, where manga is, hugely popular. It's gone massively mainstream. And this was sold. It was almost like they didn't know how to sell it, so they kind of put it under this extreme cinema banner. Because obviously, the kind of movies that kicked down the door for live action Japanese cinema were the J horrors. So it's like Ringu had come out in 1998, and there was The Grudge, and those are the films everyone remembers. But for films like Battle Royale, and it wasn't quite a horror film, it was just a really strong premise. The only one who was really promoting it, I remember, was Jonathan Ross. He was always like, watch Battle Royale and watch Spirited Away. He was very much my guy in the early 2000s. But I think, and yes, there are elements of extreme cinema, especially in the premise. But when you go back and watch this film, it's so much better than I think a lot of people probably give it credit for. It's really well directed, it's well acted, and to come back to your point, there is that element of surrealist, absurdist black comedy, and it's the reason I think it's so much better than, say, the Hunger Games movies are fine, but this movie at least knows how ridiculous the premise is, and it's all the better for it.
The difference between the Hunger Games and this is, well, it's night and day. The Hunger Games still has to be for young adults.
Yes,
so they can only do as much as they can do. But this one, they turned around and said, you know what? No, we're going to follow the book pretty much, because the book was what's the word?
Critically acclaimed. Well, it was critically acclaimed. The issue with the book, and
controversial.
The book was controversial. It was written in 96, wasn't it? But it wasn't released until 99.
Yes, it was released 99, pretty much. I'm guessing the guy, what was the director's name? Kinji Fukasaku?
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did. Kinji Fukasaku.
Absolutely. I'm guessing he read the first page of this book and thought, you know what, I'm going to make it a film, because it came out so quick compared to...
Yeah, and one of the things it does as well is it strips away a lot of, and again, the difference between, say, this and the Hunger Games is that it strips away everything but the essentials. We get hints of this totalitarian Japanese government and stuff. Yeah. Obviously, that's dealt with in much greater detail in the book. Here, it's kind of, you get a quick hint of it. It has one of the finest sequences, the finest exposition sequences in cinema history, and then it's off to the fucking races.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because at the beginning of the film, you get the news crews going, she's won, she's won, she's won. Is that a smile? Is that a smile? If you haven't watched this film before, you don't know anything about it, you're wondering what's going on. Why is this girl covered in blood, smiling, holding a teddy bear? But what's really interesting then is then you go to the school where the teacher gets stabbed, then the next thing they're on the bus, and the next thing they're being told you've entered the Battle Royale. So is it a secret or is it does
Well, that
everyone
is,
know? Because the
yeah.
students don't know that at one
Hmm.
point they might be entered into a battle royale tournament because they're given the rules, they're told
Hmm.
everything,
Hmm.
but it's hinted at the beginning of the film that everyone knows about it. So is it a secret or what?
It's very strange, and I think it is for. And don't get me wrong, I think the movie ultimately benefits it because one of the movie's greatest strengths is its fantastic pacing. I think if it
Yeah.
gets caught up in that stuff, then it drags everything down. And yes, if you stop and think about it, it doesn't make any sense because obviously you have the first that they kind of cut to that other battle royale tournament. You think, oh, maybe it's done in secret. No, they make a point of saying there's reporters everywhere,
Yeah.
and then yeah, when the kids show up at the islands, they all seem to be utterly clueless about it, which makes zero sense. Of course, the reason they have to be clueless is for us. It's for the aforementioned
Yeah, because
exposition
you got
sequence. You got the video, and you have the beat to cash you will get to is absolutely fantastic in this film. It's so they can explain it to us as they're explaining. It's basically you're sitting there in the classroom with the other kids. They're explaining to you what the Battle Royale program is, exactly what's going to happen, so they can get them out the door and kids can start killing kids because they knew at the heart of it, that's the interesting thing. That's the premise. And it's got one of the greatest taglines of all time. Could you kill your best friend? And that is immediately what the movie wants to ask you and put you into that position. Because you like, again, we were probably around this age when it came out, 17, 18, and you're like, yeah, could you kill? Because it's not just could you kill your best friend? It's like it kind of makes sense to kill your best friend. You
yeah.
know, would you go out immediately start killing folk? You know, you're in a position where it's like, what you're going to try and beat the system, but if we don't kill each other, everyone dies. It's such a strong premise that you're just thrown into this position, and what it does brilliantly, and you don't get in a lot of movies in this ilk, and certainly something lacking from the Hunger Games, is that you get so many kills and to come back to the idea that this is a black comedy, but also ultra violent, it has a hint of everything. It's got just enough sentimentality and enough emotion to ensure that the kills matter, or at least some of them do. But when the kids start getting killed, it's got everything. It's got clumsy deaths, it's
Yep.
got violent deaths,
Very
it's got
clumsy
gross
deaths.
deaths, it's got funny deaths. It has the full gamut of and how many kids get killed off in this film? Like 36. You probably see
Well,
like
there's
25 of
yeah,
them.
so I think it's 45 kids at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, isn't it? So obviously 42 kids get killed off.
Mm-hmm.
What's what? Oh, 43 in the end, isn't it? Because he dies right at the end. What I like about this, right, is the fact that this was definitely picked up and made a Japanese film before the Americans got hold of, or any Western side got hold of the book.
Yeah, yeah.
Because what they do in any film, what the Japanese or the Koreans or anything, they emote better. Like when the
Yeah.
kids are learning about it, there's a lot
Mhm.
of screaming and panic and running around and doing all this. And if you had it on the Western side, they'd all be stoic, or if they were trying to scream or anything, it wouldn't
Mhm,
feel
mhm.
right. I don't know what it is about
No,
the
there's
Japanese side
something
of the
of
acting, but
you get it in Japanese cinema and Korean cinema in particular. There's a lot of it in Asian cinema, but I watch a lot more Korean, Japanese cinema. And
yeah,
all I can put it down to is that their acting style, and it's not just kids, it's across the board, is much more performative. It's something that's been lost in Western culture, Western cinema, back, going back to like the 70s with like De Niro and stuff, and it became much more naturalistic. One of the few, and probably why he's like crossover with Japan, one of the few performative actors we arguably have left is Nicolas Cage. And he said that himself. He thinks of himself
yeah.
almost more like a kabuki actor. And you have that in Japan. And I guess for those uninitiated, it can seem almost a little bit cheesy, but it adds to the drama. But what I also like with this film is not just the performances in terms of from the physical aspect, is some of the dialogue. And again, to bring it back to your point about how if you made a Western version of this, all the kids would be stoic and poetic. It's like one of the kids is like in their last moment together. It's like, you look really cool, Hiroki. It's like, you're the coolest girl in the world. It's like, yeah, because they're kids. And do you know what kids are? They're fucking cheesy and lame.
Yeah.
They're not poetic. They're not stoic. It's like, yeah, that would totally be a kid's, like, if you just read it on its own, you look cool, Hiroki, as like a last line. That sounds lame. I actually think it's brilliant writing because that is what a fucking 17-year-old suddenly put in this position. And he's dying there with a girl he's never been able to tell he's got a crush. And it would just be a crush because these are still kids. It's just like, you're so cool, you're cool too. Dead.
It's the other
Awesome.
thing as well.
Fucking
It's
awesome.
it's the way they act when they kill or stab. I can't remember his name. It was the hero's best friend at the beginning. He stabbed
Nobu.
the teacher, Nobu, yeah.
Yeah,
He
all
stabbed
I
the
can do
teacher.
is he scream. His name is screamed every time. Nobu. It's like
So
nobody ever just says, "Right, Nobu." It's always screaming Nobu.
he stabs the teacher. The way he stabbed him was like he just fell into him. Like, why did he stab the teacher? Nobody knows, but he decided to stab him in the hip.
Hmm.
He runs away.
Hmm.
But it was like it wasn't he walked up to him, cool shot, he did the flip because there's a butterfly knife, then
Yeah,
stabbed him
yeah.
in the hip, then walked away. Like he's shanking him in prison. No, no, no. It was just like he just took the opportunity to stab a teacher in the leg and run away like clumsily.
The
And
thing is, I think it's all like the influence of anime. It's like the other end of that is Kiriyama, like one of the bad kids, but like the genuinely bad kid, the one who's there for fun. And
the
it's
kid
like,
who,
don't get me,
who
he's
seems
he's
to have unlimited ammo.
oh, dude, he's totally got unlimited ammo. How many fucking bullets is he putting into that Uzi?
I
But
think I
he,
saw him. I think I saw him reload
excuse
once
me.
or twice. And I'm sorry, right? I know you wanted to make a point, but you've
No, it's
mentioned
fine.
him now. The way like he shoots his gun, and we'll
That
get
was
to that
exactly it.
completely terrible standoff at the end because that was terrible. That standoff at the end.
It
Between,
was somewhere between terrible and brilliant. I'll
like
put it there that way.
when they're turning round and shooting a shotgun.
Do you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the end of Face Off when Nicolas Cage starts doing those pointless flips.
Yeah.
and
So see,
he
I
can't
went.
quite do a backflip, so it's like halfway between like a roly poly and jumping onto his back.
I went hard boiled, but we're
Oh
both
yeah,
on the
yeah,
same. Yeah, yeah,
same
we're both on the same
ballpark,
bit.
same ballpark.
But yeah, and every time he shoots his gun, he like waves it around like it's a wand from Harry Potter. He's just like
100%.
Varacadabra, like doing all this shit. And
But
I
again,
was
it comes
killing
back to that,
people.
like you said, the way he stabs, the way he shoots. I mean, Kiriyama looks ace. Like he's peak 2000 Japan cool. And to my mind, there was no place cooler in the world than Japan at the turn of the century. Because again, it still had that element of like the unknown. But I remember
Yeah,
like there was still like that arcade culture, that globalization hadn't quite hit, and it hasn't totally hit for Japan. They still kind of do their own thing, but there was the idea that they had their own mobile phones, that they were still kind of like in this like futuristic lands,
yeah.
where they had technology that was ahead of us. And I remember like they just dressed cool. Like, there were like Japanese kids in my university. I was just like, man, they just look cool as shit. And I knew if I tried to dress like him, I looked like a fucking bellend. But
He
they just
looks as
look
well.
cool.
And I'm sorry, you're better with Japanese names
Kiriyama.
and everything. So I'm just gonna say so the kid with the Uzi, he
Mhm.
looked he looked like he got pulled out of the school from Tokyo Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. Like
Absolutely.
the black blazer and stuff he's
The
wearing, and
cool hair.
his
Awesome.
hair is so like is it Goku from Dragon Ball Z kind of style?
Yeah, he kind of looks like, a kid waiting to become a Yakuza. He's just got that look about him. And,
No,
I think
you
if it
saw
was a
them when he pulls
Western
out the
film,
samurai sword out of nowhere. Yakuza. Just
ace. The way he jumps, again, it's style over substance for sure. Like the way he shoots the Uzi, to your point, makes no sense whatsoever. But it's that performative acting style, and visually, it just makes what would be otherwise, oh, I rock up and I shoot all these kids. It makes it interesting. What it also does is, and where's the fucking film? I've written a note. Is it's all part of the like this film's. We mentioned the fact that it's surrealist, absurdist, that it's a black comedy. I think it's important that despite all the killing, and obviously some of the kids are horrendous and some of the deaths are quite visually impactful, the movie never feels mean spirited. And I think that's so important because if you nudge it up, if you did a Western remake, what this ends up feeling like is like a Michael Haneke film. I'm not sure if you've ever seen his film Funny Games.
yeah.
It's kind of like a hype. It's
The
a
Dutch or
rough up.
the Dutch or the American.
Well, either one, they're both
Okay.
horrendous. They're really mean spirited, unpleasant movies. And there's a place for that in cinema, sure. But the reason that this film never quite tips over is that performative acting style, is that tone. And it does come back to performances such as Takeshi Mike, an actor who I absolutely adore. And I'm actually run into have you heard of the Bader Meinhof phenomenon? Like the whole thing, like if you buy a car, say like I bought a Skoda.
You see them everywhere, yeah.
Yeah, it was like when I was driving back up for Christmas from Cardiff back up to Edinburgh, I noticed a Vauxhall Grandland. It's like an SUV. And it's just because I was like, I haven't seen a Vauxhall that I've liked the look of in about 35 years. And I was like, that's cool. I must have seen about 72 Vauxhall Grandlands in the last week. And since we mentioned that we were going to do this podcast, it's like in conversation, I've ended up watching Takeshi's Castle, which has come back to Amazon, which I strongly suggest everyone goes back and watches. The original Japanese version, which is fantastic, not the British people talking over it. Fuck that noise. I was talking to my friend about Zatoichi, which is an amazing film if you haven't seen. Brother, and even Ghost in the Shell, like the Western remake, which is one of the few movies he's in. And the reason he hasn't stepped over because he's such a unique cinematic presence is simply the fact that he doesn't speak English. If he had decided, I'm going to learn English, guarantee you he would have ended up being a character actor in 1,000,001 movies. He's just one of those cool actors that I bet you directors love. But they were just like, he only speaks Japanese. We can't get him in this film. It made sense in Ghost.
I've missed the actual actor you were on about at the beginning.
Who Takeshi. He's the
Takeshi.
Yeah,
yeah. No, I know.
He plays. Sorry, I should have said he plays Kitano, the teacher. Which
I know who Takeshi is because I recognized him, but I couldn't figure out where he was. And then when I saw his name, because he was credited as, I wrote it down, Takeshi Kitano, and I'm like, who the fuck is this? And then it said also known as Takeshi. Fucking, of course, it's Takeshi.
Yeah. Takeshi Kitano. And as I said, he's got this long, illustrious history of kind of like obscure. I won't say obscure. They're obscure over here. They're probably a lot more popular in Japan, but like crime thrillers and stuff like that. And as I said, he's just one of these fantastic actors. And like Zatoichi is the one that always stands out to me as his kind of core performance. It probably isn't the same in Japan, but certainly over here. But yeah, he adds that levity and that absurdism to the film, which I think is needed.
Absolutely. Can we go back?
Sorry, quick pause. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I had to take a brief pause so Liam could cough up a lung. I wanted to mention, right, because you said about not all of them are psycho killers. Realistically, there's only two psycho killers if you look at it. There's the guy you just mentioned, the
Kiriyama
students, and then there's I hope I got this right.
Mitsuko.
Is it Mitsuko? I thought it was Takako Chikusa. It's not her, is it?
No. Chikusa, she's Go Yabari, most people know her from Kill Bill. And she was one of the more famous girls in this film. Yeah. But she's a bit mental because she's doing this whole thing where she's still running, pretending nothing's going on. And when that kid, there's always that one kid.
She's the runner. Sorry, so she's the runner. Okay.
Yeah.
The one I'm on about. Yeah, the one
you're on about. Mitsuko's the really crazy one.
The one I'm not sure really enjoyed having a scythe.
Yeah, she really enjoyed having a scythe. And I'm not sure if you watched the extended edition of this film because it's one of the rare films where the director went back and did additional shooting. I don't think it's actually as good, but Mitsuko's backstory, basically, there's a brief explanation as to why she's so mental, and it's fucking horrible.
Oh, because I obviously I didn't watch the special edition because I didn't get a backstory for her. So please feel free to mention that because it'd be interesting because you just get hints at her, like the fact that when she first sees the first girl, I think it is, and they're lying about boyfriends, or you stole my boyfriends, or you've slept with everyone in class, things like that.
Yeah. And that girl, by the way, clearly that girl deserved to die. As soon as she shows up at the door with that smile, I'm just like, fuck that bitch. She's clearly here to kill me.
Seriously, taser in the face.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So go on. What's her backstory then?
Well, it really is explained very much towards the end of the film, and it's horrible. It cuts back to her as a little girl, and her mum's like strung out on drugs or booze or whatever, and this guy's paid her to obviously sleep with her daughter. Oh. So she's downstairs. The good news is, they go upstairs and he's about to do something horrible, but then she pushes him down the stairs and kills him. So that's kind of cool. And then she's standing at the top of the stairs looking like this like badass kid, and her mum's just a fucking pleb. So it is horrible, and it does give an explanation as to why she might be so mean. And while the scene itself is obviously horrendous, it is kind of needed because she's such a psycho straight out of the gate. You're like, surely, like, if you're watching this film, everybody thinks back to maybe like their last class in high school and thinks, who would be the real danger man or the danger girl? Who's the one who's going to turn psycho immediately and just start killing people? But she really is at the top end of, I enjoy killing people, apparently.
Yeah.
But there is a reason why she'd be so kind of attached from it all.
She was too good. Sorry. She was too good with that scythe. She didn't even know what it was at first. She thought, like she was saying, I thought it was lame. But then all of a sudden, she just spurts blood everywhere from that girl. You're on about backstories then as well. One of my first notes was talking about Shuya was talking about Shuya's backstory. His dad hung himself with a cord and wrote his suicide note on toilet paper. I get that part. Why did he have to have his trousers around his ankles?
I don't know. And it was hinted that he kind of shot himself as well, like he defecated himself, obviously after he hung himself. I was just like, I'm not sure if this is needed. It really kind of sets the tone early for the film that this isn't going to... I was going to say it isn't fun, but the movie is fun. That's the thing, and I think that's why it's brilliant, is that it walks the line, and obviously sometimes really pushes to either side. It goes really ridiculous sometimes, and then it'll drag it back and get emotional or get disturbing and get quite dark. And it opens dark, but then it gets quite lighthearted when you get to the Battle Royale program. It always the film, and I think it comes down to the director, Kinji Fukasaku. He always knows when to take his foot off the gas. It's like, all right, this is getting a bit too dark. Add a bit of levity. Basically, if you're in danger of things becoming a bit, because Shuya, he's a bit much. He's one of the, and don't get me wrong, it's a classic Japanese archetype. You see it in video games, the over-emotional teenager,
Yeah.
And it's just like, sometimes, Shuya, you give it a fucking break. I know you're in a pretty tricky situation, but he's borderline annoying, despite the fact that I quite like the actor. But every time it kind of hints towards maybe pushing it a bit too far, whether it be too emotional or too dark, they just pull the cord on Beat Takeshi. They're like, oh yeah, get another scene, have him doing the afternoon report, bring in another element of the fantastic score. The fact that they use classical music for this, I think, is an absolutely ingenious decision. As I said, it's not just pacing; it's tonally, I would say, perfect. This film, because it is dark, it is funny, it is emotional, it's all of those things, and none of those things feel at odds with each other.
Go back to Beat Takeshi, right?
Mm-hmm.
How sharp and how hard do you have to throw? How sharp does a knife need to be? And how hard do you need to throw it
Excuse me.
to get it stuck to the hilt in somebody's skull?
Well, that is a good question and leads us to many other questions. So at the start of the film, we're led to believe that Beat Takeshi is a teacher. Or he's called Kitano, isn't he? So yeah, Kitano is a teacher.
Weird relationship with the one girl, because they have a backstory where he sat alone with her having a picnic or something.
Yeah, I think the idea is that obviously, like, society's gone to shit. All the other class members that's why he's so disillusioned. But he's got this one girl who's reminding him of the past. If I'm going to put a positive spin on it. So he's got this relationship with this girl because she's like this one idealized student, which leads, of course, to one of the most mental moments in the film, that fucking painting, which Takeshi Kitano actually painted. Which is fucking awesome, by the way, and kind of mental. But if you've watched Takeshi's Castle, give you an idea of just how mental he is, in a brilliant way, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's a teacher, and then all of a sudden he rocks up, and he's apparently got the army at his, or not the army, the Japanese Defense Force at his disposal. He's clearly a killer, because it's not just how hard does he have to throw that knife, how accurate he is. It's like, what is he, like an ex-soldier? Again, none of this is explained. One minute he's a teacher, next thing you know, he's apparently running the Japanese Defense Force and killing kids at his whim. Mental.
And he threw it underarm as well, which is insane. And then I love it, right? Because they all have these same bags that have different weapons in. Somebody's weapon was binoculars, somebody's weapon was a pot lid.
Genius. Again, another brilliant choice.
Yeah. But then when you get outside, the first thing you get outside, you get that poor girl walking towards I think it's our hero again, with a bolt in her neck. Crossbow bolt. And then the tubbyish kid has the crossbow. There's no way that was in a bag, because that would have hurt him when it got thrown at him. But okay, that's fine. He loses that. Then the other hero, who played by Taro Yamamoto, he was the guy with the headband on.
Yeah, he was the whole his whole story is Kawada, I think his name is. Yeah. The whole bringing him back thing, again, that's another one of those elements where if you stop and think about it, it doesn't really make any sense, but it's fine, we'll move on.
He pulled out of his bag, because he came back and got another bag. Did he know the tactical shotgun was in that bag?
I have no idea.
How is a tactical... And I appreciate what you said earlier on. If you start asking questions, you're not going to get the answers to. How are you getting those weapons in those bags when the way those bags are thrown at people, there's no they basically just
when they're coming out of like the classroom after the performance, after the video and everything, they are just getting them thrown in their faces. And if there was a crossbow in there or a shotgun, it's not going to kill on his ass. Simple as. So like you said, it's just one of those.
Don't ask too many. I get that.
No. And that's what we're here to do. Like, there are issues with this film if you decide to nitpick, and we will nitpick. But they are nitpicks. Like, none of these things impact, like, and again, he's obviously made a decision. Don't overthink these things.
Yeah, don't overthink it.
Because he
Don't go
knows
into
the strength of the film is the premise. Let's get to the premise as quickly as possible. And yes, there are problems with the film, but I would say none of them come at the cost of the quality of the film.
No, it doesn't. I totally agree with
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't come at the cost of the quality. But the biggest nitpick that I have, the biggest
Mhm,
question that I have,
mhm.
is the kid who decides that he's going to make some, I don't know, fertilizer bombs.
That whole story was weird.
Yes, like he's managed to get hold of a laptop and a generator. He's able to hack. Like he knew this was. This is again, they don't know of the battle royale program, but he
Mhm.
does because he's prepared for it. And he sends these guys on a deserted island to find fertilizer,
Oh my
napalm,
god.
gasoline.
Where are they finding him? Where are
Yeah,
they finding? He gives
no,
them a shopping list. I was like, those kids are like 17 on a deserted island. Dude, if you sent me out of 41, if you give me that list, I'd be like, where the fuck am I going to get all this?
like, and they make it, and basically that entire thing is set up just to blind the psycho at the end. That
It is, yeah, yeah. It's
that is
I right.
literally that entire storyline because nothing happens with it. They don't then go, oh, you know what, we're going to blow up the school, we're going to do this, we're
Mhm.
going to do that. It is literally just a setup to blind the kid at the end. That's it.
And the problem is because the way he shoots, it doesn't really make any difference. He still fights in the exact same way when he's blind. It's
Yes.
kind of ridiculous, but yeah, it's one of those. I'm sure it's in the book, and I'm sure it makes more sense. And they hint at greater depth about his uncle being a revolutionary, and they cut to all the pictures and stuff about guerrilla warfare and all that other nonsense. And thematically, I'm sure, again, it makes sense in the book. And if you think hard enough, it probably just about makes sense here, but it's just not given enough time. So it just kind of sits there as this side story, which doesn't. And to bring to your points, like it ends up just being an excuse to just blind the badass kid
Yeah.
because they don't have anywhere for it to go because they haven't got enough time. They go through all that process, they collect all that stuff, and then all they end up doing is blowing themselves up. It's just like, oh, after all that, and they don't really interact with anyone else. It's the one part of the film where if you were going to jettison one specific part of the film, it's that side story because it doesn't really have any impact on the
Yeah.
wider story, sadly.
Speaking of story changes, I wanted to ask because I was reading about the book and I wanted
Uh-huh.
to ask what you would have preferred, the way they changed it for the film or in the
Mhm.
book. So in the film, it's a randomly selected class. They each kill each other till you get one survivor. In the book, it's 50 classes.
Mhm.
They all kill each other until there's one remaining from each class.
I prefer it as is in the
Yeah,
movie.
because
Again,
fifty.
like
So
all
if
of a
there's
sudden it becomes.
45 kids,
Sorry.
I don't know. So 50 times 45. That's a lot of kids on an island. Just
That is, and again, I'm sure in the book it speaks to a wider word, a wider world in terms of the narrative, the whole totalitarian Japanese state, how it's all set up. This film's not interested in that. This film is only interested in let's get those kids on an island, and it makes it that more personal question. It always comes back to that question: could you kill your best friend? The reality. If you were put in that situation, how would you react? How would your friends react? That's what it's interested in. It's not interested in the world that's created the Battle Royale program. It's only interested in the Battle Royale program itself. And it's all the better for it because this film is still 2 hours long and it doesn't need to be a minute longer. If anything, as I said, I would cut the story with the three kids and the whole revolutionary stuff. So, yeah, to answer your question, 100% they made the right choice. And it's one of the issues with like, some people love the Hunger Games, but there's a reason it needed to be 3 movies going on. Well, no, it's 4 movies, and now obviously they're adding other ones. Is because say Western cinema, the emphasis is on we'll get caught up in the world building and all the other nonsense. This film, the director was like, no, that's not the interesting bit. The interesting bit is the kids killing each other. Get to the fucking races. And yeah, that's why there was they dealt with all that other stuff in the sequel. And do you know what the sequel was? Spoiler for
level.
Legacy. It was terrible. It was
Yeah.
rubbish because nobody cared about the totalitarian Japanese state. Everyone just wanted to see more kids killing each other.
In air quotes, they were randomly selected, these kids, right? It just so happened to be that they were randomly selected. They were the kids he taught before. Okay, that's fine. Every class that gets selected, does the
Mm-hmm.
teacher get killed because apparently he failed, even though they're randomly selected?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I guess again, the teachers just we don't need him there, but they do make a point of putting him on the bus. Like, does he? I guess you could
Yeah.
have a teacher on the bus if it's a school trip, otherwise the kids will start asking questions. It's like because he wasn't in on it, he's not tough enough, he goes away. But the other thing is, they're trying to paint this world, and they do it briefly, as you say, with Katana getting stabbed at the start of the film or slashed, whatever. When you see that bus ride, there is no suggestion that this is like, when I think of like Japanese kids run amok and stuff, what I always think of is Akira and the opening section where you got Kaneda and Tetsuo and stuff, and they go to the school and everyone's half-assed. They're all, there's crap everywhere. They've all got bikes. In this film, all the kids are dressed in proper uniforms. They're playing games with the teacher at the back of the bus. They all seem like, I don't know, fucking sweethearts. They're all being so cute to each other. There's the stuff with Noriko and Shuyo on the bus where they take the photo and she's made him cookies. You're like, oh my God, what an adorable class. What should we do? Kill them all. It's like, no, there's no suggestion that these kids are any trouble except for Nobu, who was expelled and then was just allowed back to school anyway, obviously. Put him in the Battle Royale program. So it's another one of those things. It makes no sense because the director was like, but I want to make the kids likable. I want it to matter when they get killed. If they're all shite bags, when they get killed, it doesn't matter. You're almost creating a world where it's like, it's understandable that every kid is a killer. Whereas the director clearly was like, no, I want it to be relatable. I want it to look like it could be your class and your friends. So you start putting yourself in their position. And you see the chubby kid at the start, he doesn't know what he's doing. He just starts running out and shooting people with the bow and arrow because he's panicked. Yeah, there would be one of those. So again, narratively, it doesn't make any sense, but tonally, it's brilliant for the movie.
I also call bullshit because I have never not been on a field trip where everyone of my class has gone. There's always a couple of kids who've never been allowed to go or couldn't make it or was sick or something like that.
I can imagine they've probably gone to great lengths to ensure that everyone attends.
So that's when you start questioning something's wrong. Wait, we're all here? Like, I haven't seen that kid for 2 years. Like, was it Nobu or Noru? Sorry, what was his name?
Nobu, the quote unquote bad kid, who the worst thing he does is he pulls a face.
You just said it. Nobu was expelled. Why have they let him back in class? Like, something's going on this bus. Why is Nobu back?
Yeah, you'd ask some questions, wouldn't you? It's like, wait, didn't you see that thing about the Battle Royale program? Nobody's asking any questions. They're just put in this situation and they're all utterly clueless, which again is super fun because it's about putting you in that position alongside them. And they do it in a brilliant way. I mean, personally, I don't know how I would react. I don't think I'd immediately go out and just start fucking randomly mowing down my friends if I was lucky enough to pull an Uzi. But it is like, because I don't know. Because I think a lot of it depends on how people react around you, I guess.
It's a tough one because you want to be that. Well, I say you want to turn around and go, oh yeah, I'd kill you all. But
do I want to be that guy though? No, because that's
what I mean.
I don't. In an action movie, you want to believe like if something bad happens, that you're going to be the hero. If you go around fucking mowing down all the kids straight away, I tell you what, you're not the hero.
You're not the hero.
You're just just a psychopath.
But it's just it's such a tough premise to have to think about as well.
Yeah.
Even thinking about to my last high school class, thinking, are there people in there I could take out without thinking? Well, there's people I didn't like, but do I really want to put a crossbow bolt through their neck? Or
like there is that element of, I guess, like in my head, if forced into the situation, would I be like, would I defend myself and take them out first? Kill or be killed in that situation.
Yeah.
But there's always you look back at your class and go, he'd be the one who was, if he was given a Uzi in that situation, would immediately start pulling the trigger. The only thing in reality, he'd pull the trigger, he'd maybe hit one kid, he would miss with the next, 60 bullets, and then realize he's completely out, and then we just have to beat the shit out of him, basically.
And the problem is,
sorry.
The problem is if you're thinking about your class and you're thinking who the psycho is with the Uzi and you can't think of one, it's probably you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wonder as well, like some of the rules, if we are going to keep with the nitpicking, is like what happens if somebody's just maimed? There must be situations, because the whole thing, like the necklaces, which are very much, it has to be a direct nod to Running Man, and there are elements of this, when you have like the countdown, and especially with Bitakashi doing the afternoon roll call about who's died and stuff, it does hint towards that kind of absurdist, surrealist, very dark game show almost. That's what it feels like. And I know you don't see the video cameras or anything like that, but that's the vibe it has. And like I said, the necklaces in particular have to be a direct nod to Running Man. But I see I've gone off on a Running Man tangent now, and I've completely forgotten what my original point was. What was I
Well,
talking about?
what do you think about that? I could tell you my
Yeah, go
nitpick.
for it, buddy.
Yeah.
Jesus
So
Christ.
my nitpick is you've just said it. He's given you the who's dead at the afternoon
Yeah, yeah,
reports
yeah.
and stuff
Oh, yeah, I know
up
what's going on. Sorry.
until the end, right? So they hint that these collars know everything. They can listen. They know. You don't see the army guys out in the wild
Hmm.
right up until the last kill,
Yeah.
where the guy pretends to kill the two kids,
Shuya and Norito.
Huya and yeah. So then they go right. Let's go check. Let's go confirm the deaths. And he's like, no, 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 it's fine. Game's over. They're dead. So
Sorry, Noriko. Sorry, sorry.
yeah. But my question is, well, did they just forget the rules, or did they just change the rules at the end? Because they're not going out and confirming the other deaths. They're just saying these people are
Hmm.
dead.
Hmm.
But they had to confirm the other two deaths, and he says, no, no, it's fine, they're dead. Like,
Yeah, it seems to be again this whole weird thing where Kitano seems to be running the show. There's inconsistent rules around the necklaces, and again, to bring it back to my point, which I kind of lost for a second there, this whole idea: what about kids who are like maimed? Because at its core, the idea is if anyone else is still alive at the end of the 2 days, everybody dies. So
yeah,
what happens if somebody's like almost dead, but they've still got a pulse and nobody's finished the job? Do you get a warning to say, listen, sector 2, there's a kid over there. They look dead. They're not dead. If you don't get over there pretty swift, you're all fucked. So you have to like run across to like shoot a kid who's already down. I don't know. There's no suggestion of that. And again, maybe we don't want to get too caught up in the kind of minutiae of the details of the Battle Royale program. But yeah, it just the ending is arguably the weakest element of the film.
yeah,
It just kind of like drifts, although it is somewhat safe by one of my favorite moments. Again, just like because I hadn't seen this film for a while, and the stuff with Shuya and what's his name, the other kid with the headband, Kawada, all that stuff. I was like, it's fine. I'm kind of losing interest. Let's wrap this shit up. And then they go back to beat Takashi, and all that stuff is so weird. And just when you think it couldn't get any odd, he shoots them with a water pistol. Like, oh, well, he's dead. And then, like, the Undertaker, for no reason, he just sits up like he hasn't been shot,
yeah.
takes a really belligerent phone call, eats a cookie, and then dies again. I'm just like, what the fuck? It's so weird. It's so
Just
weird, but it's so good.
just before that, he's doing the morning exercises, the calisthenics on his own.
Oh, and
In the
honestly, that stuff happens. I may mention this before, but I did a teaching course in China, and it was over in Zhuhai, which is on the southern coast. So, you don't get many tourists over there. And I was teaching the classes. And then at break time, they all go out into the courtyard and they all do calisthenics for like 15 minutes. So I just joined in. So, yeah, not quite as mental because it's not just me on my own, but one giant white man and a bunch of Chinese kids, and I'm just doing stretchings and
yeah,
star jumps. It's quite mental when you see it. But again, it's that whole thing. Just as it's getting a little bit too schmaltzy, a little bit too sentimental, in comes Kitano just to take the fucking edge off and make it land. And it's another one of those reasons and I think it comes back to the fact that they didn't know how to sell it in the US and in Europe, that it got bundled in with extreme cinema and it never quite got the recognition it deserved. Because when you look back, and we've had something similar with Korean cinema over the last 10 years, where, obviously with Japan, it started in 98, and there was a run of like 8-9 years when between J-horror and Japanese extreme cinema, it became relatively mainstream, or certainly more popularized for like the best part of a decade. Then now it's kind of disappeared again. In the last 10 years, it's been Korean cinema. The one thing that Japanese cinema didn't have, though, was like it didn't have a Parasite. It didn't have a movie that was recognized by the Oscars and
yeah,
really did break into the mainstream like Parasite did. And it's almost a shame that this film wasn't it. And maybe it's a bit too extreme for certain sensibilities. And obviously, with kids killing kids, I don't think too much of it, but it plays very differently in America because of what the fuck happens in
yeah,
America, of course.
yeah.
And that's actually one of the reasons that there wasn't a remake. It ran into issues like that. And then obviously, Hunger Games showed up and very much ate its lunch, and that's the end of it. But yeah, I think this was one of the better movies to like make that transition from East to West. It never quite got to the levels of your Parasites or even your Old Boys and stuff like that. And as I said, it was just because it was maybe a bit too surrealist, a bit too absurd to really catch on with critics in quite the same way, I think.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
think I've
it's still a good
exhausted,
film.
unless we talk about all the killings, or
Oh, there's
well,
so
really
many.
quickly before we move on,
You
I
got to
do have
mention
to.
you can't end the film without mentioning the dick stab. It's still to this day makes me cringe so much when she jumps on him. I mean, in fairness, he is that one slimy kid. There's always one kid who put in this situation where it's ostensibly, as far as they're concerned, the end of the world. Like we're all
Yeah.
going to be dead tomorrow.
So
Like,
why not try and
why
get wet?
you don't want to
Yeah,
die a
yeah,
virgin?
yeah,
Why don't
yeah.
you fuck me? Proper slimy kid. So if anyone's going to get stabbed in the dick, yeah, it might as well be him. But there's still something visually horrifying as a male watching somebody get stabbed in the dick.
It's visceral, isn't it? It's
Oh,
not
really? And
nice
she is.
at
Oh,
all.
she is going for it, dude. She
Yeah.
is going for it.
I wanted to mention, I mean, I'll give you that. That's probably the one, but I think I wanted to mention again the weird fire fight, blind fight at the end.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
when he's not even cocking that tactical shotgun anymore,
No,
but
just
the
shoot.
way he's turning around and shooting it, and you don't even see that he gets hit, but apparently he's now got injuries after the fight.
Well,
And
that happens to both him and Chisuga, the Chiaki Kuriyama. You know, again, Go Yabari,
yeah,
the running girl. She kind of gets shot when she's running away from Mitsuko, and it's not. And then suddenly she's dying with a friend, and again, the whole thing about at the end of the film where it just kind of ends. It's like, is he dying or is he going to sleep? It just wasn't very clear.
I I just couldn't get over that fight. Like that whole build up about making the bombs. Again, the fertilizer bombs, but they managed to find fertilizer on a deserted island. Okay. Did they go all over that island? That's a big island. And they managed to find
It's
it
a
all and get
big
it back.
island, but
Yeah.
there's so, like you said, to bring it back to deaths, there's so many cool deaths, and we can't go through all of them. I actually really like the ones with the girls. It's not, it doesn't paint a great picture of girls where they're all getting along, and then there's one moment of mistrust, and then all of a sudden they just go insane and they
Yeah.
all kill each other. It's so
Did she
fucking.
poison it though?
Well, that one girl poisoned, she was going to poison Shuya's food,
Yeah.
but then that girl ran downstairs. She grabbed the plate and ate it. So she's poisoned. Then the girl who poisoned that plate of food doesn't want to admit it. So they all start blaming each other. Next thing you know, it's like a fucking John Woo movie. It's kids standing on the table with Uzis again. Apparently, everyone's getting shot. I love the fact that, you know, with my last dying breath, I shoot back at you. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. But the whole thing has that whole remember that Star Trek episode? It was like from the original series where Spock had to fight Kirk. If
I
we
never
don't
watched the
fight to the
original
death,
series.
they will kill us. What? Have you seen Cable Guy?
Yeah.
He literally has that moment when
Okay.
they're at what's the restaurant called? Medieval
The
Times.
medieval one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The name's Spock. If we don't fight to the death, they will kill us both. It's like, that's what. And to be honest, I don't even think of Star Trek. I literally think of the fucking Cable Guy. But that basically sums up this film. It's like, yeah, I don't want to kill you, but if we don't kill each other, we all die. So from a Spock Vulcan logic perspective, you kind of have to kill your friends. It's the only sensible thing to do, even if it is truly horrifying.
Because you had the two girls at the top going, let's all get along. Let's fine. Let's talk on a megaphone. And, and then he comes along behind again, just shoots all of his wad in one go, but doesn't reload.
How many bullets did he use on those two girls? It was unnecessary. But then you get like the low key stuff. Like early in the film, you get that there's a girl and a boy, and she's like, oh, I'm not doing this. I'm not participating. She throws a bag off the edge and she jumps off the cliff. She's clearly like, I want someone to go with me. That kid does not want to jump off that cliff.
Dragged him down.
She murdered that kid. Make no mistake. He did not commit suicide. That girl, because she was cute and he didn't want to say no, she dragged him off a cliff and killed them both. She's the true villain in this fucking piece.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, we're going to have to, because I've got so many things I could talk about with this film, but we do have to move on. In terms of favorite scenes, it's easy for me. It really is the introduction to the Battle Royale program. It is, as I said earlier, a masterclass in entertaining exposition. Sure, if you stop and think about it, it doesn't make any sense. Why did these kids need to be told? Surely they're aware of it. But it's super fun. Takeshi slaying. The girl on the video is peak Japanese 2000 with the way she's dressed and everything. I love the fact that it's old-fashioned high school technology, like they cart in a TV on the wheels and everything.
Yeah.
Love that whole sequence. And if you hadn't seen it before, you probably still wonder, it's like, what kind of film is this? How violent is it going to be? You get the knife through to the head, you get Nobu's neck exploding. You know, it's super violent and really sets you up, I think, tonally for the rest of the movie. Absolutely love that scene.
For me, I think that's a great scene as well. I honestly do think it's really good. The woman on the TV, as you said, at one point I thought, and I'm pretty sure she did do it, the V shape over her eyes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So cool,
but
so cool.
I've got to go because I've mentioned it a couple of times. The weird fire blind fight at the end. It made
It's
me laugh
awesome.
so much.
It's straight out of a Final Fantasy game. Like the
Yeah,
kid looks like a Japanese, he looks like a video game character with the hair and everything. And the fact that he's not just gone blind, but like the blood's running down his cheeks. Again, it's a movie when it knows to be like ridiculous. It's like, yeah, this
yeah.
is a patently absurd moment in this film, but we're just going to totally lean into it, and
You,
somehow it gets away with it.
you hit the nail on the head when you said it feels like a Final Fantasy fight because I actually had it written down, right? I was expecting to hear the One Winged Angel song over this fight.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It really is. Again, if you just watch that scene in and of itself, you're like, well, this movie is really dumb. But it's not dumb. And it always comes back to the director, Kinji Fukasaku. Like, and he has real pedigree because, and I don't want to belittle Takeshi Mike because Takeshi Mike has made some great movies, but he's made so many movies that you almost assume that Battle Royale is a Takeshi Mike film. And not all of his films are great, put it that way. But this guy, he did Hiroshima Death March in 73. He was one of the directors on Tora 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 in 1970 alongside Akira Kurosawa. He did Proxy War in 73, Police Tactics in 74. You may not have heard of these films, but he was very prolific and he was very, like, if you go back and look at the reviews, it's super consistent. Like all of his films are like on IMDb between like 7.1 and 7.3. So this is a guy with like I said, real talent, real class, has come in and he's taken an absurd premise, and in many ways he's elevated it because this could have been B-movie silly fun, but it's better than that in many respects. In terms of, are we okay to move on to Loves and Hates?
Yeah, go for it.
So number one, unsurprisingly, Beat Takeshi's Kitano adds a sense of absurdity, threat, and pathos to the movie. Fantastic from beginning to end. Number two, minimal exposition of world building. We've already mentioned that, but it strips away a lot of the totalitarian details of the original novel and gets straight to the premise, which is the strongest element of the film. And to bring it back to Beat Takeshi again, when he comes back from the dead at the end, I'd totally forgotten about that. It's like, oh yeah, of course he's dead. And then it really is like something out of WWE, the way he just sits up and like, oh, he's going to do something awesome. Takes a really shitty call to Cookie and then just dies again. Just like, yeah, I love this fucking movie and I love Beat Takeshi.
Beat Takeshi was I didn't know I figured out halfway through, but Beat Takeshi was mine. He was really good in it.
He's great.
I mean, it made no sense how he went from being a teacher to leading this army for this, but that's fine. Go for it. I still think he chose that. There was no random selection for that class. He chose that class.
Yeah, he was definitely involved for sure.
Yeah. The second moment is a Beat Takeshi moment again. Yes, it's when the leader of the army tries to steal a cookie. Snaps his hand away, ties him up, and just says, "Get back to work." It was so, I don't know why, but that made me laugh quite a lot. And I really liked the psycho guy. I thought he had the look.
Oh,
like
totally
with the Uzi and everything. I thought he was really good.
You didn't like this film throughout. It does a great job of showing, not telling. Again, one of the reasons that it's so propulsive, why the pacing's so good, is because it doesn't get caught up in the details. It just shows you. And with that kid, they do like brief explanation, but as soon as you see him, you're like, I don't think he's in the class with the rest. Everyone else is dressed the same. He's got the black suit on. He's clearly a killer from the off, and it's just like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, he's not looking forward. He's looking away. He's not making eye contact with anyone. And then they call his name, and he just gets up, grabs his bag, and out he goes.
Total badass. Badass. I got to throw in one more. The tagline. Already mentioned it earlier. Could you kill your best friend? Like literally one of the great taglines of all time, I think. Number one, Shuya could give it a break. As I said, I do actually quite like the actor whose name I'm going to get to in a minute. Am I?
Tatsuya Fujiwara.
Yeah, because I remember him from like the live action Death Note and stuff like that. And he's got a very specific look, but he is playing the Japanese teenage archetype in this film. And that archetype can be a bit moany and a bit much. Two, it led to a pretty lame sequel, which is a shame. And three, it's a problem with Japanese cinema, but it can be overtly sentimental at times. As I said, that kind of comes with the territory, and this film probably does just enough to cut through that with some of the comedy and the violence, but it does borderline and I got to throw in those kids. The storyline with the kids in the bomb is bullshit.
That's mine. My biggest one was the kids in the bomb, because as much as we said it doesn't take away from it, there's a lot of little nitpicks that you can't not talk about. And the first one being those kids in the bomb. It made absolutely no sense. He found a laptop, but it had everything he needed on the
Yeah.
laptop. Like it just, yeah, it
It's
absolutely made
and
no
the
sense.
problem is, as we mentioned earlier, and you said the same thing as me. Most of the nitpicks, they're there to be picked at, but they don't really impact anything. And it's only when you really dig deep, like, well, this doesn't really make any sense. That's the only issue with the film where you're like, no, you are forced to stop and think about it, and it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and that's basically a lot of my hates on this because the other one then
Mhm.
is the not reloading.
Yeah.
Like that is ridiculous at this day and age. Like it's not the 80s anymore, it's 2000. You can reload your
Mhm.
weapon. It's
Yeah.
it's absolutely fine. You can
Yeah. How
do
many
it.
times did you have to reload his weapon the way he shoots, though?
Oh
It's
my God.
so silly. But
After every
it
trigger
speaks
pull.
to the film's I think the film's quality that our hates are fundamentally nitpicks for the most part
Yeah.
because most
Because
of this film does work really well.
because the other nitpick, my final hate, is the collars.
Mhm.
Like they got microphones when you want them, but they haven't when you don't need them. There's rules about that they can tell when somebody's dead, but you can't tell when the two guys are dead at the end, the two people are dead at the end. Even though I think that was more for the fact that Beat Takeshi knew that they were alive, so he want that's why he had the
Oh
water
yeah, yeah,
pistol and
yeah. That
everything.
was fair enough. But
So
again, it comes back to
yeah,
like the kids making the bomb and everything. They had the whole thing where they had the tissue under like the neck, and I'm just like, I'm not quite sure what you're trying to achieve here,
yeah.
but it is what it is.
Because the other thing about those collars was his remote. His remote
Mhm.
had to be in the clear infrared zone to actually activate them, but they could.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It was like Nintendo Wii technology. That's what it
yeah.
was. Yeah, you had to be within 6 foot and pointing it directly at the screen for sure. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, can't take anything away from the film because I didn't say I didn't like any of the characters or the actors or
Oh yeah,
anything.
yeah, yeah. But
My hates were more
there are
towards the
problems.
yeah. My
Yeah,
hates
yeah.
were more towards the nitpicks for this.
Indeed, indeed. Any alternative titles for this movie?
Yes and no. So I will go through the list, but basically it's called Battle Royale. So I'm pretty sure you can guess the alternate titles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, to a point. Right. So we're Croatia, the Royal Battle.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah. Hong Kong, the Great Escape.
No, 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 no.
Uh,
Battle Royale is
Little,
such a great title. It's such a great title that it's been stolen by a genre of video games. That's how
yeah.
good that title is. They've heard it and just been like, and why is it like you have to have the E? If it's Battle Royal, it just doesn't work. It has to be Battle Royale, of
Royale.
course.
Yeah. Lithuania, Royal Battle. Mexico, Bloody Game.
Sure.
Serbia, Fighting to the Last.
Mm.
Uh, Turkey, Game of Death.
That sounds like a Chuck Norris film.
Well, Game of Death is there's a bunch of films I think called that, isn't it? It's
The
that
Bruce Lee film?
I think there is a Bruce Lee film, but there's also I want to say it's called Game of Death. They're those We Hunt a Man on an Island for Sport films.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it totally sounds like there's probably like 72 straight to DVD movies called Game of Death.
yeah. And finally, Vietnam Battle Royale, Life and Death War.
Oh, I thought that was going to be okay until you added war at the end. Battle Royale, life and death, war. What the
War.
fuck? Vietnam, just stop. When you're ahead. Oh, it doesn't matter. Any facts for this film?
Yeah, we got a couple. So many members of the Japanese parliament tried to get the novel banned, but to no avail. When the film was released, they attempted to ban it also. Both efforts resulted in the novel and film becoming even more successful
Of
as
course.
people bought the book and went to the movie to see what the fuss was all about.
Yeah, it's like it was like trying to ban Mortal Kombat was the best thing ever for Mortal
Yeah.
Kombat.
One of the top 10 highest grossing films in Japan.
What of all time? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
awesome.
At around the hour and 5 minute mark, the magazine containing bomb making instructions that is used by Shinji Mimura and his gang is titled Hara Hara Toki, The Ticking Clock. This
Mhm.
magazine is a real bomb making magazine published by anti Japanese government activist group called Hikashi Ajiya Hanika Buso Sensen, East Asia Anti Japanese Armed Front from the 1970s.
It's a lot. Again, they've got to work on their name. Now it sounds like the Vietnamese were involved in that
Yeah.
once again. Just one too many words on that one.
None of the cast had any stunt doubles.
Yeah, that was awesome, right?
Yeah.
It's just all the kids just doing their own shit.
You already mentioned it. Uh, Takago Chikusa was played by Chiaki Kuriyama. She was cast as Gogo Yubari in Kill Bill Volume 3 because Tarantino was a huge fan of the film.
Of course he was. And she's awesome as Gogo
Yeah.
Yubari in Kill Bill as well.
The movie's banned in South Korea South Korea TV due to graphic violent scenes.
Yeah, and they've got a pretty touchy relationship with Japan at the best times anyway.
Right, I'm going to be touching on legacy a bit here.
That's right.
Kinji Fukasaku had started work on a sequel, Battle Royale 2 Requiem, before succumbing to prostate cancer.
Requiem.
Requiem, sorry. I always say Requiem, it winds people up. Requiem. Battle Royale.
I love it when it winds people up. It's like, yeah, because it's really wrong.
I do a Requiem for a Dream.
Oh, we're gonna have to Requiem for a Dream now. 100. Requiem for a Dream starts sounding a bit more like an 80s wrestler. To the ring from lands unknown. Requiem the Dream.
Battle Royale 2 Requiem. Before succumbing to prostate cancer, he had shot one scene for the follow-up with Takeshi Kitano when he died. The film was completed by his son, Kenta Fukasaku, who dedicated it to his father. I'm pretty sure his father would have said, don't fucking dedicate this shit to me.
Yeah, that film didn't get it. That's just not me saying that it's not very good. It got really bad reviews. It's just not good. Yeah. It's not very good, sadly. Give that one a miss.
Anything else in here? I can't get away from Requiem now. No, really.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
This is going to be easy. Make a change. I could probably answer both of us. It's just lose the section with the bomb making with the kids. Yeah, it is that. Yeah. So I'll move directly on to legacy. So yeah, as you already mentioned, massive in Japan. As part of the Japanese cinema wave, which kind of became popular worldwide in the early noughties. Obviously, massive influence on Hunger Games. But obviously, the weird thing is, despite that, it had such a big impact on the Hunger Games. The subsequent popularity of the Hunger Games almost ensured that there was no Western remake of this film. And I think that has fundamentally impacted its legacy, because I think if there was a remake, then a lot more people would have gone back and rewatched the original. You know? So it's one of those.
Yeah, because they'll pretty much...
Because it happened with Old Boy. Like, the Old Boy remake is actually... in and of itself is perfectly fine. It's just not as good as the original.
It's not Old Boy. It's not like the original Old Boy. Yeah.
And I'd never buy into this, like, if this argument where it's like, oh, why do you need to remake it? This film's great. It's like, yeah, it's great. But the fact of the matter is, regardless of how we might feel, a lot of people will not go and see a film if it's subtitled. They just won't. I could tell people how great Old Boy is until I'm blue in the face. Go see Battle Royale. Go see Old Boy. Go see Parasite. It's subtitled. They're not having it. I worked with a guy who said, because they try and do it with adverts sometimes, where if it's a foreign film and it's being shown in Western cinemas, you'll notice that the trailer has nobody talking.
Because you barely...
Nobody says shit. And my friend went to see a film, and they actually have to tell you at the cinema now, because obviously enough fucking people have complained, that you're going to see a subtitle film. And when he was told that, he was like, I don't want to see it, asked for a refund and left. And to this, because I'm with Cineworld, and I have a Cineworld pass, so I could just book movies, blah, blah, blah. You get an email reminding you that you're going to see a subtitled film. Just to say, you are aware, right? You're going to have to read this fucking movie. Yeah. So it's all good for who don't mind saying, why the fuck do you need to remake this? If it's a great premise, certain people, it's just stuck in Japan or Korean, they're not going to see it. So that's why it gets remade. They're not remaking it for me and you. We've got the original. They're remaking it for everyone else who won't fucking read at the cinema. So I get it. But like you said, Hunger Games put paid to that for sure.
I have it with my wife because I said I was going to sit down and watch it. And she said, oh, that sounds good. I'll watch it as well. I went, yeah, but it's subtitled. I'm going to bed. Like,
some people just don't want to read. The thing is, it's an odd one because it sounds more distracting. I don't want to say, let's use the term distracting, because when you start watching a film subtitled, and especially like if it's animated, there's a lot going up on screen, you're like, well, I'm looking at the words rather than looking at the action. Within 10 seconds, your brain just gets on board and you just do both. It's really weird. Anyway, obviously beyond the movies, huge influence on video games. PUBG, Warzone, Fortnite, the biggest games in the world, all essentially owe a huge debt of gratitude to this movie. And obviously the book and the subsequent manga and stuff. They're all based on this premise. It all came from the book and the subsequent movie. And it's led to, if you look at the biggest video games in the world right now, they're all battle royales at their heart. So yeah, massive impact. You've already mentioned the disappointing sequel and the fact that Kinji Fukasaku died and his son kind of took up directing duties. It's based on a novel of the same name by Koshin Takami. you already mentioned, finished in 96, published in 99, but it did deal more with the fascist totalitarian Japanese government known as the Republic of Greater East Asia. So again, all that swept under the rug for this movie, and wisely so, as I think we both agree. And there was a manga which ran from 2000 to 2005, which was also very popular. So yeah, massive legacy for this film. In terms of video, oh sorry,
I mentioned the legacy because it
Yeah,
made
yeah.
me laugh. You already mentioned that the remake plans were scrapped because of the Hunger Games. There
And
was also
because of like kids killing kids in America as well.
yeah, there was also there was plans to make it as an American TV series by the CW. You know that teen drama channel. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
making
yeah.
Battle Royale.
Well, they've looked at like the popularity of the Hunger Games and said like this is close, but no one can say, oh, we're ripping off Hunger Games because Hunger Games ripped off Battle Royale. So it's actually a really good idea to go back and do that. I do not want to see the fucking CW version of Battle
No.
Royale at all because it becomes a young adult thing again.
Yeah.
The reason this works is because it is violent, because it is gross, because it is disturbing, because they can push boundaries. As soon as you take that ability away, you're taking the legs out from under this movie. And a CW version. The kids would be too good looking. It would come back to what we mentioned earlier. They would all be too fucking stoic and poetic. Nobody's last words are, you're so cool, Hiroki. You know, nothing fucking awesome like that.
You'd have the woman as well.
Somebody reading a fucking poem.
You'd have one of the women falling in love with the psycho guy, and then by season 3, he's a good guy now.
Of course
and
he is.
Apparently, you've run out of ideas, so by season 4, actually, the battle royale is aliens probably controlling it.
It would just be the worst. I'm so glad, actually, that because of Hunger Games and everything else, while it would have been interesting to see a Western remake and get people to kind of rediscover the original, the fact that it's just been able to just exist. I know it ended up with a relatively shitty sequel, but it was quite easy to ignore over here, at least. I love this movie so much, and I like the fact that it's just sitting there as this kind of like time capsule of, you know, turn of the century Japanese cinema.
Yeah. I'm glad I brought that legacy back because I really wanted your opinion on CW.
Oh, great shout. Great shout. I didn't read that anyway. I totally missed that. There wasn't an actual video game, as we already mentioned, a bunch of video games hugely, you know, influenced by this.
Yeah.
But if we were going to do a modern day video game of this, I would love to see a totally imbalanced version of Fortnite. So some have guns, others have pot lids. Like Epic Games could totally do it. They have all the money. It would be a cool nod to the game's, you know, origins, where the idea came from. And it would just freak the fuck out of kids. You know, I've never played Fortnite, but I assume it's got a pretty young user base. If you suddenly, you know, they have all these crossover events where you have like Optimus Prime in Fortnite and shit like that. It's like, oh, suddenly there's Shuya and Noriko and all these kids like, what the fuck's happening? And like I said, the game doesn't really make any sense because one kid has an Uzi, one kid has a sniper rifle, the other kid just has a fucking flashlight. It's like, well, see if you can, like streamers would have a fucking field day with that. It would be so cool. And as I said, if anyone could do it, Epic Games might be able to. It was like when Rockstar just made a game based on the Warriors because they're that fucking rich. No one else is making a game based on the Warriors in like, you know, the mid 2000s. But like, yeah, we can absolutely do this if we want to. Epic Games are in that rarefied air where they've got so much money and Fortnite's so popular that they could just throw in a fucking genuine Battle Royale spin-off. It won't happen, but it'd be cool all the same. But if you don't want to do that and you don't want to freak out the young players, the other one is maybe you do a survival horror game a la Rust, or maybe The Long Dark is the obvious one because the latter probably makes more sense because you can do it in co-op. So if you both survive, you've gone all that way, you've survived all the other kids with your friends, and at the end it's like, do you both die? Do you try and break the system, or do you just turn on each other? Did you ever play Streets of Rage on the Mega Drive?
Yep.
If you played that with a friend, you get all the way through to the boss at the end, and then you give you an option at the end to fight each other and join the boss instead. It's like, oh, that's pretty cool to have that in a video game. So those would be my go-tos if I was going to have a modern day take on actual battle royale, as it were.
As much as I hate it, it is a Fortnite skin, unfortunately. Like, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, but it is, unfortunately, it is a Fortnite skin, and I've never played Fortnite. I don't want to play Fortnite. It looks like it'd give me an epileptic seizure by just watching people play it. But
I would play it if they had a genuine Battle Royale spin-off, though, because like I've played Warzone and stuff like that, but they're not as good a fit. Like, they do these crossover events. Aesthetically, it would probably make more sense, and just strip it all back, just pare it back. You just have the kids, Everyone has stupid weapons. There's no gulags or any of that bollocks. When you're dead, you're fucking dead. And maybe have like a few options where maybe you can break the system. But fundamentally, it's about kids killing kids. I'm not sure if it's going to play, but it'd be kind of cool all the same.
Yeah, it's a war. It's a
Fortnite.
It's a Fortnite spin-off. That's the winner.
Scores and recommendations. For me, I mean, this is borderline. I'm going to go with a 4. And yes, I've recommended this film umpteenth times, and I'll continue to do so now that I've watched it again. It's still a fantastic film. It's still a great watch. There's only 1 or 2 moments. Bizarrely, it's the opening sequence, the credits, which feel very of their time, I suppose. But for the most part, this film totally holds up. It's weird because there's loads of things like it and nothing like it at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's the Hunger Games and the video games that have come from this. But in terms of the tone and the violence, there's nothing which kind of encapsulates all those things and does it so successfully. So yeah, it's still, the original is still the best in that regard. So yeah, 4 stars and a recommendation from me.
So for me, it's 4 stars as well. Mm-hmm. There's some things that don't push it to a 5.
Yeah.
As much as we said the nitpicks don't hold against it, you can't, because of those nitpicks, you can't make it a 5.
They still exist. Yeah.
In regards to recommendations, it's not an easy recommendation. It's definitely a recommend to people who enjoy Eastern cinema. Like I can't recommend this.
I see what you mean.
Like I can't recommend this to my wife. I can't recommend this to like somebody I work with or someone like that. Just go and watch Battle Royale. They'll come back on A, you made me watch a film where I had to read it. B, I had to watch a film of kids killing kids. Like it's a tough recommendation.
You're right, because I've clearly lost the run of myself here because I enjoyed this movie so much, and I've made that distinction in the past. The whole like that difference between encouraging somebody who's into movies watching this, and I think if somebody is like, I'm a movie fan, even if you're not into Japanese cinema, it's like, well, push the boat out, give this a go. If it's just fucking Ted from work, who watches Mark Wahlberg movies on Netflix, it is indeed a tough sell, especially as you say with the subtitles and the kids killing kids. So yes, selective recommendations. I would put it this way: for those who I think would be into it, I would strongly recommend.
Yes,
but then I wouldn't just be recommending it to just anyone. So yeah, I think it is right to put that caveat in.
I think we're both agreed on that one. Then it's a 4 overall.
4 and a yes to some people for recommendations. So what's next week? It's your choice, sir.
I'm going to go down a different route than Battle. I can't believe you picked that for our first New Year film, by the way. I mean, great choice.
Glad we did. Yeah. Really, I really enjoyed rewatching that film. It was just because it kind of popped up. I can't remember where it popped up. Again, it's probably beats catchy. But I was saying, like, man, I have not seen Battle Royale for a while. And this podcast is always picking. It's just like, I haven't seen that film for ages. I'm going to make Rob watch it as well. Like, that's it, basically.
Yeah, which is my next choice. I haven't seen it for ages. I really enjoyed it. I really loved it. I'm a big fan of the filmmaker. So we're going to do, I'm only going to say Salma Hayek as a stripper.
Oh, well, it has to be Dogma.
It has to be Dogma.
Dude, that's a great shout, because I know people have like different feelings about this film. It might be my favorite Kevin Smith film. It would be in the conversation. It would certainly be up there, put it that way.
Yeah.
And it's worth watching just for Salma Hayek.
And I mean, we're going to go
Salma Hayek. Everyone, when they think of Salma Hayek dancing, obviously immediate, and rightly so in many respects, go to Dusk Till Dawn. She's hotter in Dogma. She is fucking smoking in Dogma. It's ridiculous. But Dogma is a really funny, really smart film, or at least it was when I watched it maybe 12, 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a while. But what I liked about I was thinking, because obviously Battle Royale can be considered a controversial film. So can Dogma. The way it approaches Christianity, or Catholicism. It's very controversial. So I'm sticking with that route. But I think when I watched it before, I thought it was a very well-made film.
Yeah,
Kevin
and
Smith
you got like a legitimately fantastic cast. Chris Rock, Salma Hayek, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Alanis Morissette, Alan Rickman. This film, and I'll save it for next week.
Alan Rickman,
Alan Rickman. This film might have my most quoted movie line, literally, of all time. I say there's a line in this film which I would say I say at least once a month to my wife. And I'll save it for next week, but it's just bizarrely become this quote in our household where we say it all the time. But yeah, this film has got an absolutely baller cast, and nobody really talks about that because they're like, oh, well, they're all, Kevin Smith's friends. But you look at it on paper, like, holy shit, man, this is absolute dynamite.
it might also be, it'll definitely be in the conversation, one of the last great Kevin Smith films, because
Ooh.
after the 2000s, he started to slip. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm a huge fan of Kevin Smith.
I really enjoyed Jane Silent Bob Strike Back, but
Yeah.
everything after that, like, is
Well, I
it
don't
Red
know.
State? That was quite good.
Clerks 2 can be considered, but
Oh
then you
no,
get to
no,
like,
I actually even like Clerks 3. I
yeah,
thought was
but
quite
then
good.
you get to Zack and me. We'll talk about it. Like,
We'll
this
talk
is not
about
now. Yeah.
yeah. We'll do it next week. So yeah. This has been what was the film we were talking about? The Battle Royale podcast. Please join us next week for Dogma. So until then, I've been Liam. He has been Rob, and you have been listening to the Hey You Guys podcast. Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Hey, you guys!